Okay, it is about 6:30, 6:31, and welcome to week 6 of Contemporary Issues in Criminal Justice. Today is Wednesday, February 6, 2019, and I'm Professor Richard Wright, and I am going to spend the next half hour, 40 minutes or so going over the details of the assignments that we have for the next week. And then also I'm going to discuss some other issues that are very important. And so I'm going to just go ahead and get started. I'm going to share my screen. So let's go right here. Okay, and right there you can see me in the corner there, and my instructor information, and then all this other information here. Let's scroll all the way down. We are in week 6. So since we're in week 6, we have one written assignment in addition to your discussion posts. Interviewing in justice studies. And it tells you what your requirements are. Now, it is so important that you pay attention to the rubrics. I say that over and over and over. I say that in my announcements. I say that on the course homepage. And it's so important. And so you see in the rubric, the bottom part requires APA. And you know how to satisfy APA at this juncture. You guys are on your way to getting your associate's degree, heading for possibly your next degree. So as you already know, this course is a course to prepare you for your future job opportunities. And so that's why this class has no textbook, for example, and that my guidance and instruction to supplement the materials that are in the module along with your written assignments. You want to make sure that you have citations in the body and references at the end. Many of you have lost 5 points. Notice that every rubric that you will run across requires citations in the body and references at the end. And it is so important. APA is so important. It's one of the school requirements. And as I've said before, and I'll say again, it actually helps you to point in the direction of academic integrity, to give credit for sources that you use. Sometimes you may say, well, I didn't use any books or articles, which you really should, or websites, but you also will be able to find information concerning an agency. You want to cite that agency in the body of the paper where you get the information in details, or the organization that you intend on doing your field report on, or any details, such as the field of interest, the FBI. Some people use organizations, state police, jails, prisons, anything that you use, halfway houses. The point of the matter is you want to be sure to cite in the body, and then provide a reference on a reference page. You want to have a cover sheet, and you know how to set the cover sheet up. You can use Noodlebib for that to help you line up your citations and your references. And so it is so important that you follow these requirements. And then you'll notice that your next fieldwork, actually, if you go down here further, you will see today's lecture, week 6. So you'll have one in week 8 and one in week 10. So your next lecture will be 2 weeks from today. All right. Same time, Wednesday, 6:30 to roughly 7:30 or thereabout. And as you know, I will give you a key word. Now, let's take a look at the course announcement for this week. Sometimes I will submit to you additional announcements, but that is only if I need to provide more direction and guidance to you. many of you tell me that you respond quicker to your emails than to the course announcement. So therefore, I concentrate on communicating with you by way of course, emails, text messages, and even sometimes phone calls, which if you've been involved in a phone conversation with me, you discover that I am very detailed about taking the time to make sure that I am helping you. So in week 6, interviewing is so important, and we're going to talk a little bit about interviews, and then your discussion assignment, answering interview questions, which your initial post was due last night at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then your reply post is due this Saturday at 11:59 p.m. Central Standard Time. And then, of course, your written assignment that I just went over with you with the rubric, interviewing in justice studies. And so that assignment, of course, is due this Sunday, as all written assignments are due on Sundays, except when we get to week 11. So you will be able to follow. So now let's take a look real quick at the course calendar. Let's take a quick look at it. All righty. And the course calendar, of course, let me take that out. There's business in there. All right, let's go right here. Here we go. So you see right where we are now. We're doing the live lecture today, and then it tells you also what your assignments were for this week. Interviewing with justice studies field. Don't worry about that. Read chapters because there is no book to read. And then your initial post was due yesterday the 5th. Your reply post is due this Saturday the 9th. And then your written assignment is due, as well as posting the keyword for this lecture that I will give you at some point. And you'll submit that in order to get your points. And then, of course, next week, you have your assignments, and you'll see that there is no lecture next week. The next lecture after today will be the 20th, okay? So you want to make sure that you pay attention to that, okay? And then let's go over to the module itself, module 6. Again, going over the assignments. You recognize that when going over the assignments, that your written assignments are, as I already referred to them, so you will know that you 1 to 2 pages, and you're going to make sure that you satisfy the requirements here. 8 potential justice study interview questions, and make sure that your responses are elaborate and that you cover them in detail. And that's the key thing that you want to do. So you want to make sure that you get that done. So you already know the details on it. Then your discussion post, and then your live lecture. I already told you when that is due. It's due by the 10th, which is Sunday at 11:59 p.m. So you submit the keyword there. Okay. So now let's go over and let's take a look at the lessons. That's just very lesson content material, which the thing today that we want to do is have you to understand interviewing, particularly in the School of Justice Studies and we're going to discuss some common interview questions, many of which you guys have included in your discussion posts that I've seen this week. And then you're going to prepare those questions and answers as well, dealing with that, so you can see what your assignment is. So now let's talk about, first of all, as you know, and I know already, that it is so important that you understand that in the process of interviewing for justice studies, one of the issues that is so important in terms of preparing for an interview is being prepared to answer questions that relate to ethics. I am a big fan of that, and making sure that you understand that there will be questions asked such as, what would you do in a given situation? For example, if a inmate, for example, solicits you to bring them something from the outside, something as innocent even as a pack of gum or something along those lines, either something that, like a magazine or something like that, you're going to be asked to answer that based on your understanding of what you should and should not do, and your ethics will be questions. You're given a lot of hypotheticals about how you would handle attempted bribes, how you would handle a situation if you knew something was about to happen, like you became aware of a person who was going to commit a crime, or either if you're dealing with corrections or jail, someone attempting to break out, or if you are able to see someone smuggling in drugs, whether it's a visitor or whatever, how you're going to respond to that. The same thing will apply oftentimes when you're interviewing for a law enforcement position, such as many are aware of the fact, there's misfeasance, malfeasance, and nonfeasance. And misfeasance is where you don't apply correctly. Malfeasance is when you are given an opportunity to do right and you don't. And the bottom line is, each of these will give you an opportunity to apply the rules and to perform admirably and professionally. The key thing is recognizing right from wrong, and we focus on ethics in this school. And then nonfeasance is not doing something that you're supposed to do when you know you're supposed to do it. So the point of the matter is that you can be questioned about these types of things during your interview, and it's very important that you understand and be prepared for it. There are other questions that are unique to the criminal justice field, as far as I am concerned, is what makes it so important for you to operate or become, whether you're going to be a law enforcement officer, parole officer, probation officer. What motivates you in that field? What desire is it that what is it that you hope to accomplish? And then the question ultimately is, why are you seeking this? And the key thing in terms of that is we've discovered this, that when you are committed to something, you're willing to put your all into it, and that it doesn't just become a job, it becomes a vocation or a profession for you. I like to remind my students that when you are operating in parole, probations, jail, prisons, law enforcement, whatever you're doing, counseling, the point of the matter is that you're going to probably perform well at what things are in your heart and you have a desire to want to do. Some common questions that we'll ask, other than the ones that I talked about, is something that I posted on your discussion post this week in answer to a student's comment, is that, and this happened to me in my interview, several interviews, why is it that you are the one that we should select? Because remember, first of all, number one, when you go into an interview, you're going to the interview with the goal of receiving an offer or an opportunity to work for the organization. You're not just going to there for academic reasons. You're going there so that you could get a job, so you can begin to work. Of course, later you can make the decision whether or not to accept the offer. But of course, if you don't get an offer first, you can't accept something that was never put there. So the question is, what makes you more qualified than any other individual? And that's your chance to be able to express your goals, desires, and as we say in like a catchphrase, is create a niche for yourself so that people remember Richard Wright for this, or they remember whoever you are for that. Recognize that the impression that you make with an individual during an interview can be and make you or break you in terms of an opportunity to get a job. And then the other thing is this. Oftentimes, there are interviews that operate like this, is that you will interview with one person first, maybe usually the HR person. If the HR person sees that you satisfy the requirements, then they'll pass it on to someone else, maybe the head of that department that you're seeking to go into. But the point of the matter is that the more interviews, you move up the ladder. So you don't get to tier 3 unless you are satisfying the requirements at tier 1 and 2. So again, I always recommend to students that you sit down, as I did. I did an interview, even first I did a phone interview. And when I did the phone interview, I had every possible question that I would ask the person that I'm going to interview. And I had those questions down. And so what I did was I put myself in the position of the person that was going to interview me. And I put the questions down, and I put the answers that I wanted to be prepared. So that when you come in for your interview, you will already be pointed in the direction, or your mindset will be focused on being prepared to answer the question. Of course, though, one of the worst things you can do is, as I wrote those answers down, I did not read verbatim those questions. Of course, not doing an interview where you're physically there. That's a no-no, okay? Because you want to have eye contact and things like that with the individual. But if you're doing it like on the phone, you can have that information there. However, you should be prepared to speak off of the script. In other words, you have those answers that you provide as guide points to help you to give a more elaborate answer. The answer shouldn't be too long, and the answer should not be too short. If the answer calls for yes, no, then you answer the yes, no. And always, one of the questions that will be asked of you and should be asked of you is, do you have any questions about what we've covered during the interview, or anything that I did not cover? That, once again, is when you start to talk about selling yourself, once again, or either something about the organization. Of course, you know already before the interview that in order to prepare for the interview and all that, you're familiar with the organization that you're, when I came to Rasmussen to interview for a job, it wasn't criminal justice, but it was teaching, and actually it was a business law course, but the same ideas that I used, and those was personal interviews where I was in the room with the people. I used the same approach that I used when I later on started my full-time position as State Program Coordinator for the School of Justice Studies in 2014, which was about 3 years later. But my focus was on being prepared to answer any questions that that individual might. And then at the end, I was asked, is there anything that you'd like to know? And I would ask them, you know, those kinds of things. There are people who sometimes are afraid to ask the question or discuss the issue in there about the salaries. And generally, that you can find before you get there. But if that's not there, you know, how's the salary structured? And if the benefits aren't given, what benefits go with the position, medical, holidays, vacations, things like that. Those are the kinds of things that are important for you to discuss. So in again, dealing with criminal justice interview questions, they may follow the same line. But as I said before, remember the questions are going to be highly weighted toward ethics. And you want to be prepared to be able to deal with that. And so as you prepare for your interview or interviews, you want to be certain and positive. You want to maintain eye contact if it's an in-person. You want to provide answers to the questions. This is not a time for you to hear yourself. Just answer the questions as specifically as possible. Not too long, not too short. Put it in this way. If you were sitting on the other side and being and the interviewer, how much information would you be expecting? And that will get you there every single time. Every single time. And you should also be aware of this. And in terms of interview questions, and this applies not just to criminal justice, is that there generally are other people who are applying for the position. And what you want to do, again, is what I had said earlier, referred to, is get yourself prepared by carving out a niche for yourself. In other words, leave an impression, a positive impression with the individual so that you can be considered for the position. The more impressions, that positive impressions that you leave upon the interviewer, the greater you increase your chances of getting the job. And so that's pretty much what I want to say. Again, you guys are doing pretty good with those questions and answers, and I think that you're well on your way to getting a job, not just interview, because the purpose for an interview is to provide that. So, and remember, in your written assignments this week, interviewing in criminal justice, where you have a chance to write about that, and as I read your papers, you actually will have a chance to cover each of these issues that I've discussed. And then your discussion posts, your initial post already should be in, then your reply post. And remember, when you're doing discussion posts, make sure you have them detailed enough and information-wise, so that someone, when they read it, they can learn something. And you may even then ask a question, but don't just ask a question alone as your post. Elaborate, because notice what it says. It says, to prepare for a discussion post, time for study, additional time for study, research. That means you may have looked at some stuff, and reflection. Then after that, then you provide the information and details that's necessary. So anyway, it's almost 7 o'clock. I am going to adjourn this session, but I want to see you send me the phrase or word, criminal justice interview. I want to see all of those. Criminal justice interview. Criminal justice interview. That's it. So I'm going to stop sharing. And again, if you have any questions, you know how to reach me. Nothing has changed. As this quarter is moving very, very fast, when you get to week 6, we have 5 more weeks to go from that point. And then the quarter will be over. So with that, I'm going to say good night. Hope to see you during week 8, which is coming up in a couple of weeks. So good night.